with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey on.
Hello again. Welcome to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Emerald Coast in Valparaiso, Florida. Whether you're a long-term member or maybe just now Googled us and are curious about UUs, we welcome you to our community. Our members and friends come from all religious backgrounds. We have a wide variety of spiritual beliefs, but we share certain principles and our work to promote justice and create a beloved community here and now for everyone. We value exploration and find hope and wisdom from many sources. We're glad you have found us and hope you'll enjoy today's service. Family ties, as you well know, can take many forms, encompassing all human emotions. Our speaker today, the Reverend Sarah York, explored this topic at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Vero Beach, Florida. Recorded on July 26, 2020, it's titled, Blessed Be the Ties That Liberate. Enjoy, and thank you for coming.
Connected by the Web of Life, a chalice lighting reading by Reverend Gracen. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose, to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice knowing our congregation as a church dispersed across communities, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life.
Hi, today I have a story for you that comes from the Islamic tradition. In many traditions, there's a person, he's called the wise fool, and he acts kind of silly, but he tells us lessons about the way we act. And so this is a story about Nasruddin. And this is a picture of a statue of Nasruddin that's in Bukhara in Uzbekistan. So he comes from that part of the world. Although, from the 12th or the 13th century, you don't know if he's like a real person or just someone made up to teach us lessons. So this is one of my favorite Nasreddin stories. Long ago, during the fasting month of Ramadan, Nasreddin was invited to his wealthy neighbor's house for a dinner party. But he was late coming back from his fields. He was working in the fields, and he debated what to do. If I go home and change, I will be late for dinner. Is it better to be late or a little zesty? Well, I haven't eaten all day, and I'm hungry, so he decided to go in his farming clothes. This is my farming clothes. So Nasreddin brushed himself off as best he could and brushed and dusted his pants and knocked on his neighbor's door. And on entering, he saw that everybody else had dressed up in their finest clothes. But he tried to make conversation with the other guests, and it seemed like he had turned invisible. No one would talk to him. He spoke pleasantly to a man standing behind him, and that man kind of moved away. And that happened 2 or 3 times. So Nasreddin quietly left the party. I'm leaving the party. And went home and put on his fancy clothes and came back to the party. And there at the party was a beautiful bowl of fruits and dates and nuts, good things to eat. And now he's all dressed up. Everybody wants to talk to him, and the host wants him to sit next to him. And the little bowl comes around, and he takes a date and he puts it in his pocket. And he takes some almonds and he puts them in his other pocket. And he takes one of the beautiful peaches and he puts it in the big pocket of his coat. And by this time, everybody is staring at him and saying, "What are you doing?" And Nasreddin said, "It's quite obvious to me that since everyone ignored me until I put on my fancy clothes, that it's my clothes that were invited and not me. Therefore, I am feeding my clothes." And that's the story of Nasreddin. And what does that tell you about how you treat people who might not be dressed up as fancy as you would like? And I have more Nasreddin stories, which I dearly love, that we can talk about later. So goodbye for now.
We are our grandmother's prayers, our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. Thank you, Elizabeth and Matthew and Violante, for that beautiful song and its images of deep, deep connections that root us in the spirit of holy presence in this world. I am grateful indeed for those of you who are putting services together every week, offering this hour when we are reminded of those connections that call us into sacred space. Like many of you, I yearn to be together in this space again, to laugh together, to offer prayer stones in the water, and to join voices in singing hymns. Sitting in front of the screen at home just doesn't do it for me when it comes to singing. My husband won't even sing Spirit of Life with me. I miss Don and Coco's greetings at the door and putting cash in the offering plate or watching children chase the dollar bills that rain from the balcony. I miss it how Scott calls out to someone in the congregation by name to welcome them back after an illness. I miss the choir, but I sure do appreciate the gift of music that we still receive each week. And though I miss so much, I am so very pleased to see that there are a few of you here today to engage with us in person. I want to talk with you today about something we all have in common: family. I think most of what we learn about how to be in relationship with people in the human family is reflected in our closer family relationships. In my work as a spiritual director, I speak with people who are dealing with all kinds of family issues during this pandemic. One person is about to go crazy because his 25-year-old son came back to live at home and doesn't seem to understand boundaries or house rules. An older parent yearns to see her daughter and grandchildren, but she feels too vulnerable to travel. I spoke with a neighbor who has 3 children, one with asthma. His wife has health issues. Their dilemma about going back to school is being played out all over the country. My heart is with those families. You hear all sorts of stories. Some families have been brought closer together. They play games together, eat more meals together. They're actually getting better acquainted. Others are getting on each other's nerves. Their life is disrupted, and they are irritable. We all know, too, how financial pressures can affect relationships. And there are plenty of people these days who are running up credit card debt or considering bankruptcy. And then there are the big events: graduations, weddings, funerals, milestone birthdays, holidays, observed online or with sparse attendance. And there are the usual family issues that persist with or without a pandemic. Uncle Herbert drinks too much. Cousin Lydia just walked out on her husband and 2 kids. Teenage daughter Cora is pregnant. Okay, I am making these up, but you get the idea. Families are where we deal with the nitty-gritty of relationship. Now I will tell you a story that is not made up. Back in the olden days, when you could go to a hair salon without risking your life, my husband Chuck was getting his hair cut. Now we all know how much therapy takes place in a hair salon, right? This time it was the stylist, Barbara, who needed to talk. Her mother had died, and Barbara, who had known for some time that she had been adopted, was a woman in her 40s, feeling quite alone in the world. No siblings, no close relatives. So she had decided to try to contact her birth mother, whom she had never met. She was very nervous. By the time Chuck needed another trim, Barbara had found her birth mother and made contact with her. But the woman did not want to have anything to do with Barbara. You see, she had not told anyone in her family about her out-of-wedlock child. Barbara was not a welcome visitor from the past. It was maybe another 2 haircuts for Chuck before Barbara reported that she had decided to visit her birth mother uninvited. She just showed up. She stood there at the door and introduced herself to the woman, fearful of having the door slammed in her face. Instead, her birth mother said, "I was hoping you would find me." This was a beautiful reunion, but the mother also insisted that the existence of this daughter must be kept a secret. Well, after a few more haircuts, Barbara reported how their bond grew, and the mother grew to feel more love than shame. She introduced her long-lost daughter to her family, and they became Barbara's family. Such is the power of shame. It's the power that divides brothers and sisters, parents and children. It's the power that isolates and alienates, that evokes jealousy and anger. You can all think of people who you know who have been alienated from people in their families because of pride or shame, or because the wounds of the past have more power over them than does the power of hope for something better. Jesus lived in a culture based on honor and shame. Over and over again, he challenged those values. In the parable of the prodigal son, for example, Jesus really rubs it in. The younger son not only spent all his money on loose living, he consorted with Gentiles. And not just any Gentiles, but pig farmers. And as if that were not unclean enough, he actually fed the pigs. So he was more untouchable than the untouchables, more swine than swine. Chances are that is why the father considered him dead, lost. As the story goes, the son realized that his father's servants had it better than he, so he decided to return home and ask his father to hire him. He had his speech all rehearsed. "Dad, I know I have sinned against heaven and shamed you. I do not deserve to be your son. Please let me be a hired hand." When he got there and realized that his father was so happy to see him, he remembered that first part of that speech, but he left off the part about being a hired hand. Humility has its limits, I guess. But this is not just the story of the prodigal son, is it? It belongs just as much to the elder brother. While the younger son was off feeding pigs and betraying the family, the elder son enjoyed his status as an only child. Not only did he still have his inheritance, but he could feel superior to his brother who had thrown his life away. He had the satisfaction of knowing that he pleased his father and his brother had broken his father's heart. So it came as quite a blow when he heard the music and he found out that his father was throwing a party for his brother. Well, you can't blame him, can you, for being upset? And that's why this story is powerful. It's only natural to be hurt when your family is throwing a big party and you didn't even get a special invitation. But being justified does not do anything for the elder son except to isolate him. So yes, he isolates himself. His honor is dependent upon his brother's shame. And when the parable ends, he's still off there in his room pouting. It is not a happy ending. Well, let's face it, there's a bit of the older brother in all of us. In everyone who has ever had to share a parent's love with siblings, especially. As a middle child, I got to be jealous of my older brother because he was the adored first child. Also, because he was male and got to go to his chosen college, Duke, while I was female, and I had to choose a less expensive school for 2 years until he graduated. And then I got to be jealous of my younger brother because he was the spoiled baby. When he grew up, he was the identified problem, emotionally immature and dependent. He always got the most attention. Still, I knew my position in the middle. Inspired by competition with my older brother, I became an overachiever and no doubt benefited in some unhealthy ways from feeling superior to my baby brother. That makes it easy for me to understand this parable, since I can see myself in both the older brother and the younger one. I was also, as an adult, the prodigal daughter. When my husband Chuck and I left for North Carolina so that I could go to divinity school and study for the ministry, we were living near my parents. And they had given us a couple of acres of property on which we built a house. My mother had also given us a beautiful antique light fixture as a gift. When I graduated from Harvard, we put our house up for sale. We intended to put the antique chandelier in the parsonage in New York, my first ministry. My mother, who was never very pleased with my moving away or being a minister, that's another story, assumed that we were leaving the chandelier to be sold with our house. In anger, she took it out of our house and she installed it in her own living room. I explained to her what our plans were, but she insisted that she needed it and she would not give it back to us. And there it dangled from her ceiling, a symbol of anger. She could never say that what really upset her was our moving away. When my mother died, the chandelier was packed up and stored in the basement. I could have taken it then, but it had become a symbol of anger and I didn't want it. Several years later, I finally let go of my anger at being misjudged, and I gained greater understanding of why my mother, who had experienced abandonment as a child, felt the way she did. I decided I could now put up the chandelier. I went to the basement of her house to get it, and I discovered that it had been stolen. Perhaps that was just as well. It is in our families, I believe, that we learn the power of shame and jealousy, anger, and pain. It is also in our families where we feel most poignantly the power of compassion and generosity, forgiveness, and reconciliation. It's in our families where we feel the holy power that liberates us from our own small, stingy feelings. Now, I don't mean that we all have parents like the compassionate father in Jesus' parable. I don't mean that we are all fortunate enough to experience the grace of unconditional love. I don't mean that in many families there are not deep wounds that take a long, long time to heal. What I mean is that there is a generous power that draws us toward healing, toward reconciliation, even when others cannot reconcile with us. And this parable is about a gracious power that is not jealous, that does not bestow honor or tolerate shame, that does not wallow in anger or guilt. Some would call it God's love, or the Greek word agape. Martin Luther King Jr. defined agape as love seeking to preserve and create community. You might prefer to call it the power of human love or the power of grace. It doesn't matter what we call it. What matters is that when you and I invite that power into our lives, it liberates us from isolation, like that of that elder brother, and into relationship. It doesn't allow us to shut each other out. It does not permit pride and shame to divide us. It recognizes anger, even justified anger, but it recognizes also that most anger feeds upon our need to alienate rather than to reconcile. When we get stuck in anger, anger feeds our hate more than our love, and it feeds our smallness more than our generosity. The parable of the two sons and their father ends with the elder son still refusing to go to the party. Too proud, too angry, too hurt. And the question that haunts us is, will he go? Will he go? And if he does, will he too welcome his brother? And if so, what is it in his heart that will stir him to do that? And more important, what will he gain if he stays in his room and pouts? And what will he gain if he joins the party? And what do you think of these two guys, of this younger son and his elder brother and their father? Why does this parable speak to us in the 21st century, and why is it will still have power at the end of the next century? I will leave you with these questions and close with a true story, a story that illustrates the kind of family values Jesus taught. It's about a very bright and sensitive young man named Steve, who realized in his teens that he was gay. He was a student in my gifted and talented English class in the 1970s, a sophomore. That was my earlier career, teaching English. Steve confided his realization of his own sexual identity only to me, and I helped him through his struggle for self-acceptance. 2 years later, when he was a senior, he was back in my English class again. And by then, he was in a relationship with a man, and he had come out to his family. His parents were not able to accept their gay son, and so he moved out before graduation. For many years, Steve and his parents had no contact with each other whatsoever. In the late 1980s, he became ill with an AIDS-related disease, and he wanted to go home. His parents not only welcomed him, they cared for him with devotion until his death a year or so later. Now, I didn't know all of this. I had not been in touch with Steve since high school, and so I didn't really find out about this until shortly after his death. Over 12 years had passed since I had seen Steve, and I'd never met his mother. So I was surprised when I received a phone call from her. Choking back her tears, she told me how Steve had come home to die after those 12 years. And then she explained why she had tracked me down. "I want to thank you for being there for Steve when I couldn't be," she said. And then, to me, a total stranger from Steve's past, she confessed her regret that she had shut her son out of her life for so many years. The tears flowed more freely as she said how grateful she was that she had opened up her heart to him again. The power of shame and the power of love. May this life give each one of us, no matter what our age, opportunities to feel that power of love in our hearts, to let go of pride, to forgive, to accept, and to recreate the world as it was meant to be.
Extinguishing the Chalice by Martha L. Munson. We extinguish the chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children.